So a while back, Ubisoft released the Svartalfheim weapons pack, which contained 4 weapons with some pretty unique perks. After testing these on the dummies in Norway and playing with them in-game, we found out some pretty interesting things with these, so we'll discuss each one of these Svartalf weapons in this video so you can decide whether they are worth getting or not. And if you are new here to this channel, first of all, welcome, but here on JorRaptor, we from the JorRaptor team would like to go more in depth on some AC related topics that we normally don't cover on the regular channel. So if you like that, leaving a like on the video would really help the channel out, and let's go. So before we talk about the weapons themselves, let's explain the basics of the buff first, because it functions pretty similar on most of the weapons. Every time you get a kill with a Svartalf weapon, you get 1 stack of a stacking buff that will improve a single stat, like melee damage on the Great Axe for instance. This buff has a cooldown of 10 seconds, meaning that if you do not score a kill within 10 seconds of your previous one, the buff is gone and your stacks reset to 0 again. Getting another stack prolongs the timer, and getting it to max stacks, which is 5 on all weapons, will make the cooldown disappear, which means that you don't need to worry about getting your next kill within that 10-second timer anymore. You can also see this effect on the weapons themselves, as they will keep glowing for as long as the max stacks are active. With the buff at its maximum, your next 3 kills will benefit from the effect of maximum stacks of the buff with no cooldown. But once you burn through all 3 of these, the perk resets back to 0. Now you might have already noticed that there are some problems with this system, and we'll get to those in a bit, but first let's admire the look of these weapons before we delve a bit deeper into the perks. Because I think we can all agree that these Svartalfheim weapons do look really cool. My personal favorite is definitely the greatsword with this very unique curved blade, but overall the golden designs with the intricate rune patterns are really cool looking. And they look even better in combat too, as each weapon will start to glow on specific parts when you start building up the weapon perk. And we showcase that here on the Dokkalfar axe, which will buff your melee damage as you start racking up kills. At 0 stacks, a heavy swing of this axe on very hard default scaling deals 120 damage against a test dummy in Norway. At full stacks, a single heavy attack deals 128 damage, so there is a visible improvement there. I do however wonder how the buff calculates its damage, because if we look back at the test footage, we see the first hit deals 120 damage. But then as soon as we get 1 stack, we deal 124 damage on our next hit, same with 2 stacks and 3, until we reach max stacks, after which we deal 128. I do not know exactly how melee damage is calculated, but it does seem weird that adding, and these stats are according to the item description, 5 points to the stat adds 4 damage, but then adding 15 on top of that only results in having 4 more damage. But luckily, if you are looking for other ways to increase your damage, there is another option in the pack, and that is the Mythical axe, which boosts your critical damage depending on how many stacks of the perk you have active. A normal crit of a heavy attack deals 134 damage against a dummy, but with the perk at full stacks we see it deal 157. And this is a pretty significant increase, as it means the difference between a 2-hit and an instant kill on these test dummies. Of course, what you do have to keep in mind is that you lose stacks of your buff when you kill someone, not necessarily when you crit. So you kinda have to get lucky and have a crit trigger within those 3 kills that the buff is active for at max stacks. There are of course multiple ways to increase your crit chance, like the Niflheim and Then armor sets or the ring sword and Durandal, so I definitely recommend equipping those if you plan to use this axe to get the most out of it. Next up is the Skadi string, which boosts your headshot damage the more stacks you have. Now I was getting some inconsistent results when it came to testing the headshot damage on dummies, but you can definitely see when the perk is doing its work at full stacks, like in this example where my damage goes from 350 to 380 thanks to the Skadi string, which is a pretty big increase. Contrary to the buff of the Mythical axe, the fact that the perk triggers on kills really helps the Skadi string out, as it means you can do multiple headshots with increased damage against a single target without losing your stacks. And this is especially useful in boss fights of course, which you can actually kind of prepare for by stacking the buff and then fast traveling. As long as you don't change region on the atlas, your stacks will remain when you fast travel, which means you can get the max stacks and then go fight a Drengir or another boss out in the world and have the full benefits of the weapon for the entire fight. To round out the pack we have the Gram, which like I said is definitely my favorite looking one of the bunch. This greatsword increases ability damage with each stack you gather. When trying this out with the Vengeance of Thor ability, I was able to get my damage from 120 to 172, which once again is pretty significant as it makes the difference between a 1 and a 2 hit kill. But then again, the fact that the kills remove stacks kind of hinders the usefulness of this perk, as abilities that can get multiple kills in a single activation, like the throwing axe fury, can burn multiple stacks within a single activation, which then kind of means that you build up your stacks for a single use of one ability and then you have to work your way up from 0 again. Another thing that limits the usefulness of this weapon is of course the fact that you cannot spam abilities, as you need adrenaline to use them, so you have to make sure that you have some available whenever you reach max stacks. But yeah, in general this stack system is I think the most problematic part of these items. It requires you to get 5 consecutive kills with less than 10 seconds in between before you can reap the full benefits of the perk. You can of course get lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, by accidentally hitting a civilian. Just don't go hunting for them because you will desync, which we tried. For science, purely. No, but in the most combat encounters, there's not that many enemies left standing after doing this in the first place, and if you don't get your kills up quick enough, you're only using the weapon at half of its strength for the most of the time. Now, if the buff was something really strong, that might have been worth it, but even though the damage increases are pretty noticeable in most instances, I don't think it's a fair gameplay reward for 5 quick kills when we have a sword in the game that can breathe fire if you simply press L1. Another problem is that even though these weapons were released in a single pack, it's not all that smart to use more than one of them in your loadout. Because the requirement for the perk is simply kills, it means that you are building up but also losing stacks at the same rate. So say for instance you've built up max stacks with both the axe and the bow equipped. If you then kill 3 enemies with your axe, the full stack buff on your bow is now also gone. And this wouldn't be a problem if you could stack the benefits, but with the buffs being as they are, only the 2 axes kind of work together. So it's not that great an idea to combine weapons from this pack in your loadout. So to round things up, I personally don't really recommend these Svartalf weapons. You can of course get them for the looks if you want to, especially if they appear at Reda of course, but apart from that, the perk isn't really worth it in my opinion. You rarely are able to use it at full strength, and even when you do, the increase does look kind of significant on paper, but you don't really feel it when you're actually using them in combat. I do like the fact that they are sort of teamed together in both design and perk usage, plus the visual effect when you get up to 5 stacks is pretty cool, but especially with the broken weapons pack out now, there are more unique and flashy weapons you can get for your Helix credits. And that's all for the Svartalfheim weapon pack. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Remember to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, and if you don't want to miss a video, also remember to subscribe to the channel. If you want, you can watch our previous video on the secret changes added in the most recent Valhalla update, and for now, have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!